Hello everyone. This is a video I made to implement those early minutes that we miss of the classroom. And it's a very simple concept that I want to talk about. It's called ecological pyramids, and it follows the next kind of model from the food web and food chains that we talked about, right? And just to briefly go over the last topic that we mentioned, right? We talked about food webs, and food webs are models that represent overlapping or interconnected food chains, and you guys did that as homework, right? And the third way to show how energy is flowing in an ecosystem is by an ecological pyramid, right? And you guys can see these little diagrams here. These are representations of the pyramids, and but what are they, and what kind of information do they give you? So one, they're models, right? They're diagrams that depict how energy is being passed, between trophic levels, how energy is being transferred between trophic levels, and how this transfer is going to affect the population of a specific community, right? Or in general, a different trophic level. And there's three different kinds of ecological pyramids. But before we get into the different kinds, let's just talk about the basic structure of a pyramid. If you see here on the left corner of the left area here, basically a pyramid, it could be a 3D representation or a 2D representation, but it's basically in the shape of a triangle, and it has several layers, right? And these layers are your trophic levels. Okay, and it always starts at the base here, and the base, okay, of course, like a food chain, always starts off with those producers getting energy straight from the sun, and you have your primary producers, right? As you go to the next level of the pyramid, you have those that second order of trophic, the trophic levels, which are the primary consumers, that they eat the primary producers, right? If you notice now, it refers to as primary, secondary, and tertiary, right? And the primary consumers are those herbivores that you think about, that they're the ones that directly eat the producers to get energy, right? As you go higher and higher, you start to get different kinds, like the carnivores, the omnivores, right? Those organisms that consume the primary consumer are called secondary consumers, and those that consume the secondary consumers are called the tertiary. And one thing that is consistent between the different kinds of pyramids is that as you keep going higher, the population and the number generally starts to decrease, right? As you whatever it is you're talking about, until you reach like a minimum point. So in the case of population, the base is the max population of organisms, which are the primary producers, and then as you go higher, the population between these trophic levels starts to decrease until you have a minimum population, right? Or a minimum amount of biomass or amount of energy as you're going up the pyramid, right? So there's three different kinds of pyramids that we're going to talk about here. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is a pyramid of energy. And the pyramid of energy, it is exactly what it's referring to, right? It's showing how energy is passing as you go from trophic level to trophic level. And it starts with primary producers. And to give you an example, let's say you have 100% amount of energy in the primary producers. Now, we're going to talk about specific examples with specific number of kilojoules per amount of mass per amount of year, right? But just for simplicity's sake, the key idea of energy, you get the most out of primary producers, right? But as the consumers, the primary consumers eat the primary producers. Of course, as we mentioned before, a lot of the energy that is used in these primary producers is lost as heat, right? Is lost as heat, and a lot of the energy is also used to maintain the plant, to maintain these producers. So when a primary consumer eats a primary producer, actually only 10% of that energy that the primary producers are obtaining and that they're basically are obtaining from the sun gets passed down, right? And then as you talk about primary producers, that they're being consumed and passing energy to the consumers, the same thing occurs in the next trophic level, the secondary consumers. As they consume or they eat the primary producers, right? The same thing happens. Only 10% of the energy that is inside these organisms can get passed down, because the same concept, energy is lost as heat, energy is lost as maintaining the body. So there's a net decrease to the amount that could be passed down from 100% to 10% to 1%, into the third trophic layer of consumers, right? To the third level consumers or tertiary consumers, right? That they ultimately would get 0.1%, right? There's too little energy. And so the available energy, as you go up, the energy levels will decrease. Okay, so that's pyramid of energy. It's basically showing how energy is being passed down between trophic layers and essentially having a 10% pass down of that initial number, right? This pyramid and in pyramids in general do not take in consideration decomposers and detrivores, because they feed at every level, right? And it will make it much more complex to establish this kind of net energy transfers. And since they're the recyclers of nutrients, they really bypass this kind of 10%. And one thing about the 10%, it's a general average. It could be 16% depending on the cases, specific cases of energy. Okay, and the next energy pyramid we're going to talk about is the pyramid of biomass. And biomass is very similar to energy and how the content that's being passed down decreases, right? And but what is biomass? Biomass is organic material made from plants and animals, and this could be wood, this could be feces, manure that is being produced, and waste that is being liberated from animals, organic garbage, dead material, right? Crops, foliage that is being that has accumulated over time. So this biomass, same concept. As you have the biomass producers, okay, you have the highest amount of biomass, and as it passes down, that energy, okay, or that amount of biomass that is being produced in the different trophic layers begin to decrease. Okay, one thing about biomass, it has a particular unit called grams per meter square. All right, and as you go to this particular kind of biomasses in the different trophic layers, definitely you see a large decrease in amount of biomass per trophic layer, right? And then the third kind of pyramid is the pyramid of numbers, and this is another way of saying population, right? And let's starting from the beginning, always talking about the primary producers. Let's say you start off with a population in a community or a total amount of organisms in this category of 1.5 million, right? As you go up the pyramid, you're going to have a huge decrease in the population of these trophic layers levels. Primary consumers, they're going to be much smaller in turn when you compare with the primary producers, because the amount of energy that is being passed down is much less. So there's less amount of energy actually that you can use to make a large population, right? You're not going to have 1.5 million